Millions of Americans are putting their money into high-yield savings account and feeling smart about it. They see the 5% interest rate, they see the word high yield, and they think finally I found something that works. But here is what the banks are not telling you. That 5% rate, it is already starting to disappear, and the money you are parking there thinking it is growing, it is actually losing ground in ways most people never calculate. This is not about fear. This is not about some complicated financial conspiracy. This is just math. And once you see it clearly, you will never look at your savings account the same way again. What a high yield savings account actually is. Let us start with the basic because most people using these accounts do not fully understand what they signed up for. A high-yield savings account is a saving account offered mostly by online banks that pays a significantly higher interest rate than a traditional bank account. The national average for a regular savings account sits around 0.4% annually. A high-yield savings account in recent years has offered anywhere from 4 to 5.5%. That sounds like a massive difference. And in raw terms, it is if you have $10,000 in a regular saving account, you earn about $40 per year. The same $10,000 in a high yield saving account at 5% earns $500 per year. That is genuinely better. Nobody is arguing that a high yield saving account is worse than a regular savings account. The question is whether it is the smartest place for your money right now, and the honest answer is more complicated than the marketing suggests. The rate is not guaranteed. Here is the first thing most people do not read in the fine print. The interest rate on a high yield saving account is variable. That means the bank can change it whenever they want. And they do. The rates you see advertised today are tied directly to the Federal Reserve's federal funds rate. When the Fed raises rates, which they did aggressively between 2022 and 2023, high-yield savings account rates went up. When the Fed cut rates, which they have already begun doing, high-yield savings account rates go down. There is not speculation. This already happened once before in 2020 and 2021. When the Fed held rates near zero, high-yield savings accounts were paying around 0.5%, not 5%, 0.5%. The people who had been relying on high-yield savings account rates as their financial strategy had to completely rethink their approach almost overnight. And we are now entering another rate-cutting cycle. The Fed has already signaled multiple cuts are coming, which means the 5% you see today is almost certainly not the 5% you will see 12 months from now. The inflation problem. Now here is where the math gets genuinely uncomfortable. Even at 5%, even at the peak of what these accounts are paying, you are barely keeping pace with inflation. The Federal Reserve targets 2% annual inflation. But real inflation, the kind that affects groceries, rent, insurance, energy, and everything you actually buy, has been running higher than that for the past 3 years. In 2022, inflation hit over 9% annually, the highest in 40 years. And in 2023, it moderated to around 4%. In 2024, it is still sitting above the Fed's 2% target in meaningful categories. So let us do the honest math. Your high yield savings account pays 5%. Inflation takes back 3 to 4% of real purchasing power. Your actually real return, the gain in what your money can actually buy, is somewhere between 1 and 2%. That is it. 1 to 2% real return on money that you think is growing at 5%, and that assumes the rate stays at 5%, which we just established it will not. You are not falling behind dramatically, but you are not building wealth either. You are running at just slightly about break-even. The opportunity cost, this is the real cost. Here is the number that should genuinely make you stop and think. Opportunity cost. What you are giving up by keeping money in a high yield savings account instead of putting it somewhere it can compound at a higher rate. The S&P 500, the 500 largest companies in America, has returned an average of 10% annually over the past century. Adjusted for inflation, that is approximately 7% real return per year. Let us compare that to your high yield savings account. take $20,000 in a high yield savings account at 5% over 10 years. You have approximately $32,600. The same $20,000 in a broad index fund at 7% real return over 10 years become approximately $39,300. That is a difference of nearly $7,000 over 10 years on the same initial investment. Over 20 years, the gap becomes enormous. 20,000 in a high yield savings account at 5%, but realistically declining rates, grows to roughly 45,000. 20,000 in an index fund at 7% real return grows to approximately 77,000. The difference is $32,000. And the same starting amount just from the decision of where to put the money. That is what opportunity cost actually means in real dollars over real time. So, who should actually use a high yield savings account? Before you close your high yield savings account and move everything, stop. Because there is a specific and important use case for these accounts. And getting these wrong in the other direction is just a costly. A high yield savings account is the right tool for money that needs to be accessible within the next 1 to 3 years. That is its correct purpose. Your emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of living expenses belongs in a high yield savings account. Why? Because you might need it tomorrow. If you invest your emergency fund in the stock market and the market drops 30% the same month, your car breaks down and you lose your job. You are forced to sell at the worst possible time and lock in real losses. Liquidity matters for short-term money. Your high-yield savings account also makes sense for money you are saving toward a specific near-term goal. A down payment on a house you are planning to buy in 18 months, a wedding fund, a car purchase, any money with a timeline under 3 years should stay liquid. The problem is not that people use high yield savings accounts. The problem is that people use high yield savings accounts for money that has a 10 or 20-year timeline. They treat it like an investment vehicle when it is actually a cash management tool. Those are completely different image. The 5 account framework. Here is the framework that separates people who build wealth from people who manage cash their whole life. Every dollar you should be assigned to one of 5 categories based on when you will need it. Category 1, immediate access. 0 to 30 days, this is your checking account. Bill money, day-to-day spending money, no interest needed. Full liquidity required, regular checking account is fine. Category 2, short-term buffer. 1 to 12 months. This is your emergency fund. Your high-yield savings account belongs here. 5% on this money is good, it is accessible, it is safe, it is doing a job. Category 3, medium term goals. 1 to 3 years. Down payment, wedding car, major planned expense. High yield savings account still works here. Possibly a short term treasury, bond or CD for slightly better returns with a known timeline. Category 4, long term growth. 3 to 10 years. Index funds, broad market, ETFs. This money has time to ride out volatility. A high yield savings account here is actually costing you compounding returns. Category 5, retirement. 10 years plus. Roth IRA, 4101k, maximum tax advantaged growth. Not a high yield savings account, not a saving account, not even a bond heavy portfolio if you are under 40. Most people only operate in categories 1 and 2. Checking and saving, they never build categories 4 and 5, and that is why their money never feels like it is getting ahead even when the interest rate is technically good. What you should do instead. Now let us get specific, because the answer to this video is not just stop using high yield savings account. The answer is use the right tool for the right money. Here is exactly what to use based on your timeline. For your emergency fund, keep it in the high yield savings account. Seriously, this is what it is for. 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high yield savings account is exactly right. Do not touch this strategy for money you will need in 1 to 3 years. Consider one bond or short-term treasure. One bond are issued by the US Treasury and their rate is tied directly to the inflation. When inflation is high, they pay high. When inflation is low, they pay accordingly. They are not going to make you rich, but they protect your purchasing power better than a high-yield saving account in a rate-cutting environment. The downside, you cannot access them for the first 12 months, and there is an annual purchase limit of $10,000 per person.
The tax problem with high yield savings account. Here is something that barely gets mentioned when people celebrate their high yield savings account rates. The interest you earn on a high yield savings account is fully taxable as ordinary income, not capital against tax. Ordinary income tax. If you are in the 22% federal tax bracket and you earn $500 in high yield savings account interest, you owe $110 in federal taxes on the interest. Your effective after-tax yield drops from 5% to approximately 3.9%. Add state income tax in most states and it gets lower. Meanwhile, the gains inside a Roth IRA are completely tax-free. Long-term capital gains in a regular brokerage account are taxed at 15%, lower than ordinary income rates for most people, and I-bond interest state tax exempt and can be federal tax deferred. The high yield savings account is the least efficient of all the alternatives. That is not a reason to avoid it for its correct purpose. Your emergency fund is your emergency fund regardless of tax treatment.
The psychology trap, why people stay in high yield savings account too long. There is a psychological reason that the high performing financially literate people still end up relying on high yield savings account. And it is worth named rightly because it is not laziness or ignorance. It is the feeling of safety. Money and a saving account feels safe. You can see the exact balance. The number goes up every month. There are no terrifying drops in value. The stock market feels dangerous. You see headlines about crashes. You hear people lose money. The number moves up and down in ways that feel unpredictable. Behavior economists call this loss aversion. We feel the pain of a loss approximately twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of an equivalent again. So a month where your high yield savings account balance quietly goes up by $40 feels good. A month where your index fund drops 5% feels catastrophic, even if the long term trajectory is strongly upward. The high yield savings account exploits this psychological preference for certainty over optimal outcomes. It gives you the feeling of doing something smart with your money without requiring you to sit with the discomfort of market volatility. And for the right category of money, your emergency fund that certainly is genuinely appropriate. But when certainty psychology bleeds into long-term investments decision, it becomes expensive. The cost of emotional comfort is real. It shows up in the gap between what your money could have compounded to and what it actually did. Understanding this does not make you immune to it, but it gives you the awareness to ask, am keeping this money here because it is the right financial decision or because it feels safer? Those are different answers and they lead to different outcomes. The action plan. Here is exactly what to do. 4 steps. Step 1. Identify your true emergency fund amount. 3 months of essential expenses minimum. 6 months if your income is variable or your job feels uncertain. Calculate the actual number, not an estimate. The actual number, that amount stays in the high yield savings account permanently. It is doing its job. Step 2. Identify everything above your emergency fund sitting and savings. This is your excess cash, money that ended up in savings because you didn't have a better plan for it. Do not feel bad about it. Most people have this, but name it honestly. Step 3. Categorize the excess cash by timeline. When do you actually need this money? Within 1 year? T-bills or short-term CDs, 1 to 3 years, one bond or a later bond strategy, 3 years or more. Start moving it into a low-cost index fund on a schedule. Not all at once. One lump sum investment can feel psychologically brutal if the market dips immediately after. Dollar cost average at over 3 to 6 months. Step 4. Open a Roth IRA if you do not have one. $7,000 per year. Any income under the limit qualifies. Vanguard, Fidelity, or Scape are an excellent option. Put a total market index fund inside it. Set up an automatic monthly contribution, and then this is the important part. Do not check it constantly. Set it, let it compound. Check it quarterly. That is the whole strategy. The bigger picture. Let me pull back and say something that ties all of this together. High yield savings account are not a scam, they are not a mistake, they are a tool, and like any tool, the question is whether you are using it for its correct purpose. A hammer is a great tool, but if you try to use it as a screwdriver, it will strip every screw and damage the wall. The high yield saving account is the right tool for short term, accessible, stable money. It is the wrong tool for wealth building.
And the bank know this. They market the 5% rates aggressively because it attract deposit. Your deposit are their raw material. They lend your money to someone else at 8 to 12% and pay you 5. The spread is their profit. That is not a complaint. That is how banking works. But understanding it means you understand that the bank interest in offering you a 5% high yield savings account is not purely in your financial best interest. It is in there. And once you see that clearly, you can make decisions that are purely in your own best interest. Keep the right amount in your high yield savings account, move the rest where it has the opportunity to genuinely compound, and check back in 10 years. The gap between people who made this distinction and people who did not will be measurable and tens of thousands of dollars.